All eyes are on California. And for me, all I can think of every time I see Gavin Newsom's face and this news about the California recall is that scene from Starship Troopers, right? Where Doogie Howser puts his hand on the big weird looking bug and he says, "It's afraid. It's afraid." Let's talk about it. I'm Nick Ricada of Ricada Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer. I'm also a legal and political commentator on YouTube and on Odyssey. Wherever you're watching, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Make sure you don't miss any videos, okay? Here we go. Check this out. Gavin Newsom, a federal lawsuit, has challenged the California recall as unconstitutional. Okay, I know you know what's going on, but just for a brief recap, it turns out people don't like being treated like garbage and having all of their rights abdicated. So eventually, they get mad at the person who does it, and as a result, they have moved to recall Gavin Newsom, according to California's recall process, which is going to encompass a two-stage process. The first question is whether or not Gavin Newsom should be removed from power. That's the first question. If he makes 50% of the vote, if it says 50% or more, well, more than 50%, say he needs to go, then he has to go. The second question then is, well, who's going to replace him? And there's a big list of candidates, and you pick them. And so whoever gets the most votes, that's the new California governor. It's this process that they've created. It's there, and that's what they're going to use. But see, here's the problem. Gavin might actually lose. That's when suddenly this is an issue because Gavin might lose. And if Gavin loses California, they don't know what to do. So they're terrified of this prospect. And so now what they're saying is that this is unfair, okay? So they say, well, but what if 49% of the people said Gavin Newsom should stay, then less than that vote for the next guy? Doesn't that mean that Gavin Newsom got more votes than the next guy? Well, no, it doesn't, actually. It doesn't mean that at all. Because saying someone should stay and choosing them to be your governor are two actually distinct things. They're different. They don't mean the same thing. That's why it's two different questions. That's why there's not just a list of people with Gavin Newsom on it that says, who should the governor of California be? Because that would be a completely different process that doesn't involve a recall. That would be naming a governor. But we've got some very big eggheads out here saying that this is what it should be. This is unfair to Gavin. But it's not unfair to Gavin. Gavin has every opportunity to keep his seat as the governor. But that's what they want. So let's take a look at this article. You can read this. It'll be linked in the description if you want. But 2 California voters are challenged. The voters are. Sure. This is one of those cases where a politically motivated person grabs a couple voters, grabs a couple people that might have standing. And interestingly, these people shouldn't have standing at all. But I digress. We'll talk about that in a minute. They grab people who might have standing, and then they say, we're being harmed by this, and therefore we need to go ahead and take this on. But oh wait, I'm overstepping something. I'm forgetting something. Do we remember what we call election lawsuits, right? Lawsuits that challenge the process or whatever of an election. What do we call those? Undemocratic, I think. That's how we do that, right? You can't challenge the election law. You can't challenge anything because that is anti-democracy. And how dare you bigots hate democracy so hard that you're willing to sue democracy? I can't believe you. Gavin needs to fall on his own. Gavin needs to fall on his own. But we'll talk about that whole standing argument because that's going to probably be a thing in this lawsuit. At least if I were the opposing party, I would be raising the standing issue. That would be one of the big questions here. But we'll get to that in a minute. So echoing concerns from constitutional scholars as Governor Gavin Newsom fights for his political life. So one of the constitutional scholars, actually the guy who wrote the constitutional law book that I was taught from at law school, his name is Erwin Chemerinsky. Smart guy, very much an egghead though. Poindexter academic. We can call him a nerd, throw him in a locker or whatever, and it would fit. It would make sense to do this, right? Like he fits the stereotype, and that's fine. Irwin is a very, very smart guy. But one thing you have to know about very, very smart people who are also lawyers, who are law professors and everything, is they're still just people, and they still have political motivations and political perspectives. And Erwin Chemerinsky is no stranger to being, pretty much on the left. I mean, the majority of lawyers are. The majority of lawyers are on the left, and especially the majority of academic lawyers, but that's a separate discussion. Okay. A complaint filed in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California argues that the state's recall provision violates the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution by allowing sitting governors to be replaced by candidates who have received fewer votes. Yep, but they're not sitting anymore. That's, again, you're misunderstanding what happens. See, the recall, again, that's a separate question. That first question is, do they deserve to stay? And if the answer by more than half of the people is no, then they gots to go. Get them out. That's the whole purpose of the recall, is to recall the governor. The replacement question is a separate question. It's not replacing a sitting governor. You're replacing a recalled governor. But here we go. The plaintiffs Rex Julian Baber and A.W. Clark want a court order either prohibiting the recall election or adding Newsom's name to the replacement candidate list. You can't replace someone with themselves. Doesn't work that way. Elections officials have already sent millions of ballots ahead of a state deadline today. Gubernatorial recalls in California involve a two-part ballot. Voters are asked whether to recall the sitting governor, then who should replace the governor. If a majority of voters oust Newsom, whichever candidate receives the most votes on the second question would replace him. Cue Larry Elder looking to come in and sweep the deal. That allows a replacement candidate to be elected with a small plurality and potentially with far fewer votes than the number of votes cast to keep the current governor. Yep. By the way, that's still, the votes to keep the current governor would still be less than the votes to remove the current governor. So they're just skipping this logical part because they're terrified that Gavin's gonna go. Let's see. While polls show Newsom in a tight race to stay in office, if you're the left's champion in California and you're in a tight race, you're in trouble. The leading Republican contender to replace Newsom has consistently registered support from a quarter or less of the electorate. There are 50 different candidates. There are 50 different candidates on the ballot. That's not surprising to anyone. Constitutional law expert Erwin Chemerinsky, dean of the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, raised that precise scenario in a New York Times op-ed last week, arguing California's recall process is unconstitutional. Chemerinsky and economics professor Aaron Edlin argued for altering the rules to allow governors to stand as candidates on the second question, and advocated for a legal challenge compelling the courts to intervene. The court could declare the recall election procedure unconstitutional and leave it to California to devise a constitutional narrative. Or it could simply add Mr. Newsom's name on the ballot to the list of those running to replace him. That simple change would treat his supporters equally to others and ensure that if he gets more votes than any other candidate, he will stay in office. But as we saw in the federal election, and this will be the tell, equal protection claims don't have standing based on being a voter who is similarly situated to every other voter in the state. I talked about this during Lin Wood's lawsuits. It was one of the key reasons that Lin Wood's lawsuits were dismissed. He didn't have standing to raise the claim simply as a voter, because everybody around you is also a voter and they're similarly affected. Standing requires a particularized injury, and, well, they don't have it here. What particular injury do you face? Well, I'm a supporter of this person. Okay. Even if you are, and almost half the state is, that's still not a particularized injury, because you all get to vote in the exact same process. And the process is simple. Does Gavin Newsom get to stay? Now, Gavin Newsom spent a bunch of money, a bunch of the state's money, to buy his votes, right? He's probably going to end up staying, if we're being pessimistic about this, because once his recall became a real scenario, suddenly the lockdowns were relaxed. Suddenly people are getting stimulus money that never existed before. Like, all this stuff is happening. Money's just flowing out of the state and into the hands of potential voters. I mean, weird thing for Gavin Newsom to flat out buy votes, but that's what he did. Will it be enough? Only time will tell. But here's the reality, is that every single person is put in the same position in California. There's no equal protection issue. They're all equally protected by the same law. And that is, everybody has the opportunity to vote on whether Gavin Newsom stays or goes. And then everybody has an opportunity to vote on the replacement for Gavin Newsom. It wouldn't make sense to recall a governor and then have that person be replacing themselves. That defeats the recall. That makes the recall logically inconsistent, and that's why it doesn't work that way. But they are grasping at straws here, and this honestly should be completely removed on for lack of standing. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. We saw how they treated these election lawsuits during the presidential election of 2020. We'll see what they do here. Baber, a Los Angeles attorney and clinical psychologist, would not say in an interview if he's a Democrat. He's a Democrat. Of course he is. You know, lots of Republicans out there, what they're doing is they're trying to do a lawsuit based on an Erwin Chemerinsky thought experiment in the New York Times, and just to keep Gavin Newsom on the ballot because of fairness. That's what all the Republicans in California are doing right now. So anyway, that's what's going on in this case. They're trying to do this. Legally, it should be futile. Like I said, the main point of this is, one, you've got no standing to bring this lawsuit as two voters. Maybe Gavin Newsom would have standing to bring the lawsuit. Maybe he would, but he's not the one bringing the lawsuit. See, they're trying to find two people to do that. So maybe Gavin would, but he didn't. So you've got two random voters. They're equally situated to everybody else, which means equal protection probably isn't violated. I don't know how you can not be equally protected when you're exactly equal to everybody else. So that's one of the big problems. The other problem with this is that the law as it stands is simply just a logical progression of how this works. Again, they're trying to conflate the first step and the second step. The first step is the recall. The second step is the replacement. If you try to make Gavin be on the list of replacements, that's not a replacement. The recall is the first democratic question. Does a majority of the populace want this person gone? See, that would similarly be a violation, to have the majority of the population wanting a person gone, but a less than majority of the population replacing them with the by keeping him. That doesn't make sense either. And so this law was written in a particular way to receive a particular result. That's being overlooked and conflated in the name of politics, because it always is. You know this, but why don't you tell me about it? Drop a comment down below. Look, Gavin Newsom is terrified of losing this election. I can't wait to see what happens. We'll keep you guys informed. And until next time, thanks for watching. Peace. Peace.